Today we will talk about romantic love. But before that, a few things. So this whole series we've been looking at knowledge and silence and transformation. And many a times to work through some of the things we're experiencing, we rely on things that can take us into silence, like silence retreats. You've tried that out, meditation and yoga and whatnot. Sometimes we use sports, exercise, other activities that can make us feel silent inside, right? We want to bring down the noise in the mind. And all this can help. But if the underlying issues have not been resolved, then those thoughts come up again, the storms come up again. So silence or trying to silence the mind alone doesn't always work in a sustainable way. Then the other way that we try to work through the noise in our mind is to talk to people. Read books, for example. There are many books that can help us in dealing with what is going on inside. Or we talk to a therapist, or we talk to a good friend. And we try and understand the roots of the noise inside our mind, try to get insight. Why is it that there is this noise in the mind? And the noise in the mind could be feelings of pain, suffering, whatever, right? Distraction, confusion. And that can also help, of course, and it does help. But then if the underlying issues are not resolved, they come up again anyway. And so throughout this series of talk, we've been trying to look at how we can work with both silence and knowledge together. Silencing the mind, but at the same time gaining insight into what is actually going on. And we've been looking at various topics until now. We've looked at desire and morality and grief and things like that. Today we will look at romantic love. Love as such, but the romantic version of love. The special kind of love, they say. So we'll talk about that. But before that, let's try and get into silence a little bit. And then we will proceed from there. So once again, 4 steps. Remember the 4 steps? The 3 steps, pretty much the same. The 4th you can customize, depending on your belief system. First step, relax the body. Don't give any trouble to the body. The body has to be relaxed. The tension of the mind sits in the body. When we begin to relax the body, the mind sometimes also learns to relax a little bit. So that's the first step. Relax the body. Make sure the body is not stiff or rigid in any way. Sit comfortably. Second, relax the mind. And the way to relax the mind is not to try and control thoughts so much. Let thoughts come and go. Let thoughts come and go. Don't try to push away or suppress any thoughts. Don't try to hold on to any thoughts. Let them come and go and come and go. Step 3, slip beneath the thoughts into that experience of silence, which we talk about as the space of soul. The silence in which thoughts are coming in, feelings are coming in, emotions are coming in. Try and listen to that silence beneath all this noise. There is always that silence in which this noise is happening. So listen to that silence and get into that soul space. And step 4, depending on your belief system. If you believe in a higher power, doesn't have to be religious belief, but a belief in a higher power, a source of healing, then you place yourself in that presence. If you have a religious faith, then you can use that faith. If you don't have a religious faith, but you still believe in some sort of a higher power, you place yourself in the presence of that higher power. And if you don't have a faith, and if you don't have a faith like that in a higher power, then I say, try and focus on the higher self, the highest version of yourself. Think of one value that is the most important for you. Today, maybe it could be love. I think all of us value love, don't we? Anyone doesn't value love? We all value love in some form or shape. So maybe it could be that you bring up this value that is related to your highest yearning, your deepest yearning, and just bring that into your mind, and you place yourself in the presence of your own higher self, you could say. So you can customize that. So in the meditation commentary, when I say the divine, you can interpret the version of the divine. So to me, the divine is the highest. So the highest could be a higher power outside you, but the highest could also be the higher self, your own self, the highest version of yourself. So we will have a little meditation, silence practice. Relax yourself again. Let the body relax. Yes, we have some nice, comfortable blankets if you want to use them behind you. Of course, for those of us here, not those online, they'll have to find their own blankets, depending on where you are. Okay, so let's relax. Pay attention to any tension that may be sitting in the body. You can close your eyes if you wish. You can keep them open if you wish. It's entirely up to you. Both ways are fine. And allow the body to relax. Relax your feet and your legs. Relax your stomach. And your chest. Pay attention to any tension sitting in the muscles of your shoulders. And relax the shoulders. Relax the muscles of your neck. And the muscles of your face. Notice how tension sits in the tiny muscles around your mouth, your eyes, your forehead, and relax these muscles. Relax the tiny muscles around your mouth, around your eyes, and your forehead. Pay attention once again to your neck and your shoulders, and relax. Feel a wave of relaxation flowing throughout your body from the top of the head to the tip of the toes. And turn your attention inwards to the mind and pay attention to what may be lingering in the mind. The sound of people talking outside this room. Sensations from within this room. Thoughts of the past, thoughts of the future. Whatever it may be, accept all these as a part of your life space. Don't try and push them away, but try not to hold on to them. Imagine that all these thoughts and sensations are like particles of sand in a lake of water, floating around, making the water murky. And these particles of sand gently settle down into the bottom of the lake, making the waters of the mind clear, clean, still. And you listen to the silence within. The silence in which all thought, feeling, emotion enter. The silence that is always there. The silence of soul. Your innermost essence. Listen to this silence. Hold on to this silence for a few seconds. And in this experience of silence, your innermost essence, you place yourself in the presence of the divine, the highest. This could be a higher power, a source of healing in the universe. Or it could be your own highest self. And you feel a sense of deep stability within. You find your inner center, your space of wholeness. Your space of peace. Your source of power. And holding on to this space of power, you allow yourself to gently return back to the awareness of the present. You allow your eyes to gently blink open, looking out into this world. Look around you, make eye contact with one person and smile. So, love. We will talk about love today, romantic love. So one question has always been very interesting to me since I was, I think, in my early 20s. You know, I was always, of course, not just me. I guess many people are very interested in romantic love, aren't we? Especially when you're young, right? I don't think it changes with age, does it? I don't. Yeah, it probably stays. There's something in it. Say, love makes the world go round. Now, how round and how fast, that's a different question. Sometimes it makes you dizzy. But when I started studying psychology, I got fascinated by one thing. So let me ask you, it's a question I've asked before. When if I ask you to think about a story of romance, what comes to your mind? Like, out of all the famous stories of romantic love, what comes to your mind? What do you say, Monica? Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet. Anybody else? It's terrible. But the funny thing is, and this is something that really stood out to me across the world, across cultures, across countries. You ask people to remember a story of romantic love, right? In the so-called Western world, if you ask people, very often they will say Romeo and Juliet. If some people who've studied a little bit more about, history and the mythology in the West, they think about Tristan and Isolde. It's a Celtic myth. It's a love story. Tristan and Isolde. There have also been movies made on that myth. It's a Celtic myth. Romeo and Juliet, of course, has become the most popular myth. What happens in Romeo and Juliet at the end? Both die, right? So Juliet pretends to be dead because she wants to escape getting married to this person she doesn't want to be married to. And she's been married in secret to Romeo anyway. Romeo believes she's actually dead, kills himself. Then Juliet wakes up, sees him dead, kills himself. Right? That's what we remember. Okay, Tristan and Isolde, same story. right? So Tristan, his uncle is King Mark, and then he goes to bring Iseult because King Mark wants to marry Iseult. But then he falls in love with Iseult. They drink some magic love potion. They fall in love with each other. And long story short, at the end, Tristan is sort of, he goes away somewhere else, and then he's wounded by an arrow, and then he believes that only Iseult can cure him. And then he's waiting for her to come. And then he tells people that, if she comes with white sails, if the color of the sails are white, that means she's coming. If it is black, she's not coming. And then Tristan's wife at that time, she's very jealous. So she makes sure, she says that it's black sails. And then he just dies in grief. But Iseult is actually on the boat. And she comes and she finds him dead. Then out of grief, she dies. That's what we remember. All right. You go to the Arabic world, you ask people, story of romance. They remember Laila Majnu. Same story, right? Laila Majnu. Majnu is also a word for going mad because he falls in love with her and she also loves him, but then she gets married to somebody else, so he goes mad. And long story short, at the end, both die. That's what we remember. You go to Iran and you ask people, story of love, Shireen and Farhad. Shireen, Farhad, what happens? Same story. They fall in love. It's difficult for them to be together. Shireen is a king's daughter, and then the king tells Farhad, well, you have to dig this huge something, tunnel or something. And then he keeps doing that for a few years, and he's half done. Then the king doesn't like it. He's afraid now that he will have to marry his daughter to him. Then he hires somebody to go and pretend to mourn and then tell Farhad that, well, Shireen is actually dead, so there is no point in doing all this. And hearing that, Farhad kills himself with the spade he was using to dig the ground. Shireen hears about it. She comes up to that place and she kills herself. Both die. That we remember. You go to India and you ask people famous story of romantic love. They think about Heer Ranjha. Heer Ranjha. There is even a grave. They both have a grave. People go there to sort of pay respect. I don't know if this is really a true story, but there are actually two graves, Heer and Ranjha, and people go every year. There is a celebration. There is a festival. Same story. They fall in love. They can't be together, right? And at the end, basically, both die. So the question in my mind from that time was, why has humanity decided to remember romantic love as a tragedy? Because the famous stories are always tragedies. There are also happy stories, but somehow we don't remember them. They're not that famous. The famous stories across the entire world are tragedies. I was in Turkey once, and then there is some tower, on the sea somewhere. Again, sad story. Somebody locked up the princess there because they didn't want her to marry the lover, and then she got bitten by a snake, and then she died. Right, and the guy finds out and he kills himself. That's what I hear. So yeah, so that's my question. Why has humanity decided to remember romantic love as a tragedy? And is romantic love always a tragedy? Or might there be some information in it for us? So if you had asked me 10, 15 years ago, I would have said romantic love is basically a tragedy. But I think my understanding has changed. So now if you ask me, I would say it can be a tragedy. It can be a tragedy, but it can also be something that is trying to tell us something. And today we will try and get into this dynamic. I will share some of my own stories, because that's how I try to understand these things. But so we will talk about love. I'll try and capture this here. Right? So we talk about love, and love as such doesn't have to necessarily be romantic, but when we talk about love, we are talking about some sort of an affectionate bonding. There is a bonding I experience with somebody, and there is a lot of affection in that bonding. There is a sense of care. There is a sense of tenderness. right? You want to care for that person, you want to protect. There is that feeling, and there is a very strong bonding. So that can be with children, that can be with siblings, that can be with friends, that can be with, I don't know, neighbors, that can also be with strangers sometimes. You feel this sort of tenderness, this kind of a bonding, and this kind of affection for the other. So we know that. And then we have romantic love. And in romantic love, normally the affectionate bonding is there, but along with that, there is a strong attraction of some sort. It's a bit difficult to explain it clearly. Now, the attraction, many would say, is sexual, but actually, it's not always sexual. The romantic attraction can be sexual, it can also be asexual. Most often, we see it as something sexual, but it can be asexual. And this is something I did not think of that earlier. I was thinking, okay, that it's always sexual. The attraction is always sexual. Then I talked to a friend of mine. She is now in her like late 20s, and she shared an experience. So she identifies as bisexual, and she says she's always known it. But then she also said until she was about 17, she thought she was asexual. She thought sex was just gross. Sex was just gross. Shouldn't, it's all weird. And, I don't want to engage in something like that. Until 17, she thought she was asexual. But in spite of that, she shared an experience when she was like quite small, preteen years. And she said, my first love was my friend in school, a girl. She was so much in love with. And then she said, but the thing is, I never had any desire to like physically engage with her sexually. It was just not there. I just wanted to hold her hand and brush her hair, stuff like that. Brush her hair, hold her hand. That's all I wanted to do. And then it struck me, yeah, well, this is romantic love, but it's actually asexual. But it is there. There is a strong attraction, and then there is this affectionate bonding with the other person. But it is asexual. So it can be sexual, it can be asexual. And since having talked to her, then I've been talking to many other people, and then I see actually romantic love in many instances is actually asexual. And in many instances, it is sexual. There is a strong sexual attraction involved in that. So, yeah, so but there is a strong attraction of some sort. And then there is this also a bonding. There is a lot of affection in that. So we will talk about this dynamic, and then today we will talk about. It's a pretty complex topic as such, of course, but we will talk about two aspects of this experience. And to make it simple, I call it the experience of falling in love and the experience of being in love. Slightly different experiences, or perhaps significantly different experiences, depends on how we understand them, I guess. They are different, and sometimes, of course, they can come together. The experience of falling in love. It's also interesting how we have chosen the word falling in English, falling in love, right? Why not rising in love? We always say falling. Fallen in love. Have you fallen? What does that really mean, right? And then there is the experience of being in love. So the falling in love experience, often when I look at my own experiences and when I talk to people about it, there is some sort of an obsession with the other, right? There is also a kind of an infatuation with the other. And infatuation comes from the word fatuous. Fatuous basically means something that is silly, something that is not serious, something that is pointless, something that is silly, that is fatuous. And infatuation is this kind of, I don't know, getting enamored by someone. So there is a sense of obsession, there is a sense of infatuation. And then on the other hand, when we talk about being in love, there is a sense of, I don't know, some sort of, there is an intimacy and there is a sense of commitment. There is a sense of care for the other in some way. Now, there is interesting research on this, by the way, in psychology, the experience of falling in love. Do you know how long it lasts?
6 months.
Up to a year, they say. Up to a year, sometimes year and a half. So the average they would say is around a year, but somewhere between 6 months to a year and a half. And this has sort of been experimentally seen over a period of time. So it's sort of, we see that this is sort of short term. It usually doesn't last. Sometimes, of course, the attraction can continue over a longer period of time, but that kind of obsession and infatuation sort of moves away. So we see that it is short term. Very often it relates to experiences of frustration when it is not realized. And when it is realized, there is the experience of disappointment because the fantasy rarely lives up to the reality. This is the experience of sort of falling in love. So we all experience it, not all, but many of us experience it. The being in love, some people, so very often when people talk about romantic love, they talk about this experience as romantic love. And if you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have said the same. But over time, I think my experience has somehow shifted. And I would say romance can be there in both forms of love. So what we can have romance without obsession and infatuation. I feel so. There are aspects of romance that can still be there in this kind of love. But normally people would talk about this as romantic love and this as what they would call companionate love, because there is a sense of companionship here. Yeah, I will just write this down. There is a sense of companionship. This is more durable, longer term. So we can have experiences where people have been sort of together and they have this experience of being in love for many, many years. It's also possible. It happens. So that can also happen. So many times people say companionate love and romantic love, but I have chosen to use these terms instead, falling in love and being in love. And I would like to share some experiences I have had of falling in love and being in love and how my understanding sort of changed over time. So, falling in love, I think I should share an experience that I had. This was like how many years ago now? 10 years ago, actually. It was a very significant event in my life. Oh, I did fall in love before, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this experience that radically shifted my understanding of what is actually going on. So, yeah. And the experience was very interesting, right? So I felt like, the typical psychotic, crazy kind of love that you talk about, total loss, losing touch with reality. It was a very powerful experience, very powerful experience. I did not even ask the girl out, by the way, at that time, right? But I was so much in love with her, so much. Oh boy, I would think of her, I would go like, so happy, actually, right? I would be sitting like this and I would think of her and my legs would start shaking in excitement. I was thinking, what's going on? I mean, we are not even in a relationship, but just the thought would make me so happy. Oh boy, it was beautiful. It was so beautiful, right? And I had all these sort of tender feelings, and it was so beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. And that was also the time I decided to move out of my monastic life because it didn't feel authentic anymore, because I was feeling like this. And I said, well, it doesn't make sense for me to go around saying, I'm leading this life, which is, spiritual. And my understanding of spirituality changed through that. But anyway, so this was going on. absolutely fascinating, beautiful, wonderful, right? I would look at a picture of this girl somewhere and I would like go, and I was thinking, am I going mad? Right? I was thinking, have I gone mad? Is this like years and years of repression finally bursting out? Right? Because I had been a monk for like 19 years at that point. So I was thinking, is it that, right? Repressing things for such a long time. But it wasn't particularly sexual. That was the thing. I think sexuality was there in it, but it wasn't like, I remember another time I'd fallen in love. That was sexual. That was like, there was nothing but a sexual sort of, fascination. But this was different, that I could see. It was very, very deep, very deep. And so initially, of course, I was thinking, okay, I'm just going to meditate it away. Right? So I would sit in meditation and it would just go away. Right? Earlier, that was my experience because I'd committed my life to living a life of celibacy. So whenever I would feel some sort of, attraction towards somebody, I would meditate. It would actually go away. So I thought, okay, this is what I need to do. I go deep into silence, and it will go away. But it did not. It only became stronger. So sometimes I would sit in meditation, I would think of her, and I would start smiling. If anybody had seen me, they would have thought, okay, this person has gone mad. He needs to see a psychiatrist. He probably needs to be on medication. I would just become so happy, right? And I was thinking, what's this, And I meditated for like 6 to 8 months on this, right? Nothing happened. The feeling remained. It only became stronger and stronger. And so all my old understanding that this whole falling in love is basically coming from spiritual emptiness, that theory was there, right? So the theory is basically that what we are trying to do is we are trying to find some sort of a completeness in the other. This is the theory, right? That's what I believed in for a long time, and I think it is partly true even today. And so this is it comes from some sort of a spiritual, you could say, emptiness, where I'm unable to experience myself as complete inside, and therefore I want to find completeness in the other. This is the theory. Even in psychology, that's a theory of romantic love for a long time. Carl Jung, for example, talks a lot about that. And in his analysis of romantic love, basically he says, well, we have the inner, the soul, anima or animus. So he says in a male. Now, of course, we don't talk about the gender binary anymore so much in today's world. So because gender is a lot more complex. But many decades ago, we had nothing but the gender binary. We had male and female, right? But now I think that the understanding is a lot more complex. But basically what Jung said in the 1940s, 50s, 60s at that time is that there is the spiritual part of the self that we are unable to find a connection to. In the male psyche, it's the anima. In the female psyche, it's the animus. So the animus is the archetype of the masculine self. And the anima is the archetype of the feminine self or the feminine perfection. And the anima and the animus, Jung's theory was this, they form the syzygy. It's like they both form the self. So the wholeness of the self comes from the anima and the animus that hang together, that are together. It's like the yin and the yang together. The positive and the negative, not negative as in something bad, but masculine, feminine in that way. Both the forces are together. That is wholeness, and that is the self. So the self consists basically of the anima and the animus. And the understanding for a long time, and this was also my understanding, is when we are born into a body, and I have a male body. So in some way, I am identifying more with my maleness, but I lose touch with my own feminine self over time. That was the understanding for a long time. Same thing with a woman. If I'm born into a female body, I lose touch because I begin to identify with the female, with the feminine more and more. I lose touch with the male part of myself, the animus. And then my life is then spent searching for that missing part of me, and I project that onto others, and I try to experience that wholeness through others. So, but that would sort of fit in more with the gender binary heterosexual relationships. Relationships are a lot more complex and nuanced. We know that. But to a long story, just basically a long story short, the idea there is a missing part inside us that we don't find a connection to. And we want to find that completeness in others or through others. That's the basic understanding, the spiritual emptiness. So the understanding is in meditation and spiritual practices, when we begin to connect with the soul, with our inner spiritual essence, we begin to bring these two parts of the self together and we become whole and complete. So that was my understanding for a long time. And so when this happened, I was thinking, okay, this is coming from spiritual emptiness where I want to find completeness in the other. Solution, meditate. And I will become complete, and then the feeling will go away. But the feeling was not going away. So what to do? And then I noticed over time something interesting happened. So the feeling wouldn't go away. The feeling became stronger and stronger. Every time I would meditate, I would think of this girl, and I would feel this happiness, this beauty, this. I would feel energized. See, that's why it can be so seductive. It is so powerful. That feeling is so powerful. And yet, if it is not realized, it can lead to frustration. And if you eventually end up in a relationship with that girl, it might lead to disappointment because the reality will not always match the fantasy that we have in the mind. All that can happen. I never got to find out with this girl because I never even went out on a date with her. Such a big experience, right? Very interesting. I asked her out at some point, and then she wanted to meet, and then I don't know, for whatever reason, she sort of backed off. So I don't know, but maybe it was good that I never entered that relationship, because the likelihood is if I had entered that relationship with that fantasy in my mind, I would have either been frustrated or disappointed, or I don't know. I don't know. I'm hypothesizing. I don't know. But what happened to me, and that is what changed my understanding of these things. So the question that I had earlier was, why has humanity chosen to remember romantic love as a tragedy? And then the following question was, is romantic love always a tragedy? Or does romantic love have something in it, some important information for us? And this was my experience. So as I kept meditating, something over a period of time, so that never happened, and over some time, and that went on, by the way, like for 3 years, I think, I would still think of that experience, and I would still think of her, because 3 to 4 years, it was very powerful. But I also knew that there was no future there. That wasn't going to happen. And yet there was the strong pull. So this is what I noticed over time. Initially, I would think of her, I would feel this joy, this bliss, this happiness. It was uncontrollable, right? My body would shake with happiness. It was like that. And then I noticed something over a period of time, as I kept meditating, the feeling of happiness and joy and beauty, it remained even without thinking about her. So over time, I stopped thinking about her. But in my meditation, those feelings remained. And they remain until today. And then I was thinking, what actually happened there? And what is actually going on here? So now, when I sit in meditation, many a times I have the same feeling of happiness and joy and beauty. Sometimes my legs shake with happiness, right? And I go spontaneously, sometimes I'm sitting spontaneously. I go like this, there's a surge of pleasure. Where is it coming from? I don't know, but I feel that. And there is no object in the mind. That object has gone. And so I thought, hey, this is interesting. And maybe here we have the key to transforming such experiences for our benefit sometimes, because I feel when we fall in love in that way, There is important information there. And that experience can actually connect us with our deepest self, with the soul, if we know how to do it. So the question is then, how do you do it? And then over time, I've tried to practice that, and it seems to kind of work. And this is the thing. So, finding completeness in other is probably not a very good idea as such, anyway, because then, it becomes unfair also on the other person. Then we project all stuff on them. And then it's like we have outsourced our happiness. You are responsible for making me happy, right? You are responsible for making me feel good. And if you don't do that, you have failed in your function. And then you're out. I have to break up with you. So the same person I loved so much, I can begin to hate because of this dynamic, because I have projected my own incompleteness on the other. You were saying something, Pierre? Yeah, because I've projected my own incompleteness on the other. I'm trying to fill myself up through that incompleteness, and that's not happening. So then I get frustrated, and that can lead to anger, and that leads to so many breakups in the world. I don't really know because I've never broken up. It's a very weird experience. I've never actually broken up. So I don't know what that means. And not that I had so many relationships, I had like 2 relationships in my life, right? One many years ago when I was like 17, 18. And one recently, like 4 or 5 years ago. But both the relationships, I didn't break up. So I don't really know what that experience is because I'm still good friends. But breakups can happen. And we know they do happen and it can be quite painful. So anyway, this dynamic, I think, is useful to look at and work through. So how do you work with this? Very often, this whole finding completeness in the other is a specific kind of relationship. We can call it the I-it relationship, where the other is seen as an object of my self-interest, an object that will somehow make me complete. I don't see the other as a subject, as someone who possesses their own feelings and thoughts and emotions and needs. I see the other as existing for my benefit. I may not necessarily understand it that way, but that is essentially what is happening. The other is an object of self-interest. So I objectify the other. And this objectification can happen in very, very so-called innocent ways. Even at the level of society, sometimes we romanticize the other. We romanticize the other. So let's look at the whole immigration debate, right? At some point, we had many immigrants coming into Europe. And some of us are afraid of having immigrants in our countries. Others want to have immigrants in our countries. There are reasons for both. Those who don't want immigrants in the country, they're maybe afraid of, losing their identity and maybe some even material things like jobs and stuff like that. Those who want, they have this understanding of, but why not? We should open up the world to everybody. Everybody should come in. And the other is just beautiful. And the refugee and the immigrant, they're just wonderful. We romanticize, we have this romantic notion of the other that doesn't always match the reality because humans are humans everywhere in the world. And humans can be beautiful. Humans can also be a little difficult sometimes. And when we meet the other, when we meet the reality is not always something that matches our fantasy. And then we get disappointed. Then we become rigid. Then we want to do something else. And, all these things happen. So this romanticizing of the other is basically objectifying the other. We see the other, and we see the other as something beautiful and good. Yes, of course, the other is beautiful and good. The other can probably also be a little nasty sometimes and, not that good sometimes. And have we prepared for that? Are we willing to engage with the reality of being human, which is both beautiful and sometimes not so beautiful? So the same thing can happen here, that I am seeing the other as an it. not really as a person, but an object of consumption that can make me feel good about myself. So, how do you deal with this kind of, sort of relationship or this kind of experience? In my understanding, this requires a transformation. So, coming back to the experience of romantic love, from the talk about immigration and all that, we'll leave that aside for now. Maybe we'll talk about it in the spring because I really want to talk about that as well. But this transformation, in my experience, there are two things. One is I hold on to the feeling of beauty and happiness and joy and wonder that I experience when I fall in love. I hold on to the feeling, but I separate from the object that has stimulated these feelings inside me. And I do that simultaneously. So I hold on to that feeling. And this is something that sort of happened spontaneously and naturally to me in my meditation. So over time, I could see I was holding on to that feeling. And the feeling is beautiful. Why would I want to give up on feeling happy and joyful and beautiful? That is just, why would I want to give that up? But then that feeling has been attached to an object. And there the object is the other person. And when that feeling is attached to the object, I want to possess the object because I believe, it's my belief, that if I don't have that object, I will not feel like this anymore. That's an irrational belief because I can actually feel like that. If I'm feeling like this, that feeling is coming from within me. It's not coming from that person. It's not coming from that person. That person becomes a symbol of that feeling. That person becomes the stimulus to awaken something within me. But that feeling is in me. I am feeling it. If I am feeling it, it is within me, but it has been fixated on the object. And I learn to separate that feeling from the object. I can still stay with that feeling. And yeah, maybe I can enter into a relationship with that person, perhaps in some cases, right? In other cases, maybe it is not possible for various reasons, right? That may also happen. But if I don't learn to separate that feeling from the object, the chances are there will be frustration and disappointment in cases where such things cannot work out. In cases where they can work out, it would still serve us well if we can separate the feeling from the object. Because sometimes these two can go together, right? So many a times people fall in love and then over time they develop a more durable companion-like relationship. That also happens. That also happens. And sometimes people can have this kind of a relationship and then they fall in love. I've also experienced that, by the way. So, and we will talk about that as well. So this can happen. So yeah, this is one thing I've sort of learned from that experience of falling in love, right? That falling in love is a very important information for the self, for the soul. It tells us what we are capable of. It tells us we are capable of loving selflessly. We are capable of feeling happiness and joy for someone else. We are capable of that. And these capabilities are inside us. It's just that they have been fixated on the object. So you separate from the object, we hold on to the feeling, and we hold on to that power that is there within us to be able to love selflessly, to be able to feel like that, to be able to give ourselves in that way to somebody else. And that somebody else doesn't have to be one person. We can then transform it. It can be all the people around me. Every day, I meet so many people, the stranger in the metro, the person at the, supermarket counter who is taking money or, charging me for buying all the grocery that I've bought, my colleagues, my family members. I meet so many people. And if I can share that love with them, that which I'm experiencing, if I can share that love with them, then that experience can actually become more powerful. I separate from the object and I distribute it to the world because I feel it. So yeah, so that's a little bit change in my understanding of romantic love, that it is a bridge to major transformation if we can use it as that. But we need to do this, separating it from the object. And then I was thinking, this, if we can actually succeed in doing this, we can actually work from a different space, right? When this transformation has happened, and then I am operating from a space of, it is not like it's a final space of completeness, but it is a space of, I would call it a transcendence. What is transcendence? It's a heavy word. What does it really mean? Transcendence is an experience where I go beyond my own limited self, where I go beyond my own limited needs, and I'm able to see you for who you are. If I don't transcend my own limited needs and my own limited self, it is difficult for me to see you, for you, for the beauty of you. Then I will keep seeing parts of myself in you. I will keep projecting the incomplete part of myself onto you, and I would want to experience that. It doesn't have to be in romantic relationships, it could be anywhere. It could be with my students, it could be with my clients, it could be with my friends. I want you to make me feel good, basically. In romantic relationships, it takes a different form. It's much more intense, but it's basically the same thing, right? I want you to make me feel good. But if I can transcend my own needs, and I can do that when I can sort of satisfy them, if I can feel that inside me, then I can transcend it. If I can feel that love in me, I don't need it so much from you. If I can feel that happiness in me, I don't need it so much from you. And then I can actually transcend it. And when I transcend, the other thing is, I would say, synthesis. Synthesis is the process of integrating, bringing things together, bringing things together. So, for example, my inner feminine, if I can be allowed to use the gender binary again, right? But if I can bring my inner masculine and feminine selves together, that is what we would call integration, synthesis. If I've had, like, for example, I've lived in a monastic life for many years. I don't do that anymore. But can I integrate all the beauty of that life, which I have experienced? Can I bring it into my life? Can I bring it and integrate it with the way I live today? This synthesis. So the experience, for example, my experience of falling in love with that girl, can I begin to integrate that with my life? Can I synthesize it within myself? In my own inner experience of beauty and joy and happiness, but also can I bring it into my world, in my actions with the people I meet? Can I share that with them? Can I experience that in various relationships? Then I'm also making myself free, and I'm making the experience of that love even more powerful and much more nuanced and much more complex. Because I can experience the happiness with you and you and you and you and you and you. And therefore I become, there is a lesser need for me to project it on one person, which is unfair anyway, both for that person and for me. So can I synthesize my experiences of the past, and can I transcend? But I can do that if I feel that sense of fullness inside me. So if I'm able to do this, then I can actually work with acceptance, both of the self and the other, and I can focus on the positive. By the way, there is some interesting research on this. When we talk about being in love, now there are various ways of looking at it. One is being in love with you, for example. The other is, I the being, I, the being, love another being. So the being, I, the being, am in love with another being. And here the beings are meeting. This is a relationship of I and thou, or I and you. These are the words of Martin Buber, German, Austrian German philosopher. One of his very famous books is basically, it's in German, it is called I and Thou. And he says there are essentially two forms of relationships in the world. One is the I-it relationship, where the other is an object of self-interest that I can use to fulfill my own needs and my own inner completeness. It is coming from a space of lacking. And the other is the I-thou relationship, where the other is not an object, the other is a subject, and I respect that individuality of the other, and I engage with the other from that space. So it is the I-thou relationship. It's a relationship of acceptance of the other as the other is, and understanding the beauty of the other as the other is, not our own inner projections of the other. And this I-thou and I-it relationship can exist at different levels. It can be with our children, it can be with our siblings, it can be with our colleagues and friends, but certainly it can be also in romantic relationships. And then it begins to transform. Let me just look at the time. Yeah, I think I'm kind of done. Am I not? Oh yeah, one more thing though. This transformation is a little bit complex because our relationships are also very often a result of our past experiences. And there are different experiences that come into play here. So when we talk about transformation, it is also the transformation of past experience. I will just talk about two things, right? So this transformation is also important, very, very important, I think, in any kind of a romantic relationship. One is our experience with significant others. Significant others could be our parents, caregivers, but these could also be initial romantic partners, for example, right? Significant others, people we've had significant relationships with. And the past experiences might also have to do with cultural ideals. And these also need to transform if they are not necessarily very healthy. So for example, we know we have different forms of attachment. There is a secure attachment the child can have with the parent, right? Which is supposed to be the best form of attachment. And then there is anxious attachment, right? There is avoidant attachment, the different patterns of attachment that children can have with the caregiver. And very often we see that we carry these patterns with us into adulthood. So the relationships that we get into, they carry the patterns of these relationships we have had with significant others. So for example, if I have an avoidant attachment style with my caregiver, then I avoid, and that's how I try to keep myself safe, because if I engage with the other, then I experience that I could be betrayed or I could be hurt, and then therefore I avoid. The anxious attachment style is, I don't want to be separated sometimes because I feel that if I am separated, then I cannot take care of myself. I need the other, and then I hold on to the other. So these patterns can manifest themselves in our romantic relationships. One pattern is I try to avoid getting intimate. And intimacy is very, very important for any kind of durable relationship. Psychological intimacy. I avoid that because I'm afraid that if I get intimate, then I will be left on my own, left to my own devices. I will be abandoned. I will be hurt. And therefore, I bring that into the relationship. And then I avoid getting intimate. I, in fact, will sabotage any kind of intimacy. I may even break up with the other before the other breaks up with me. And those kinds of patterns that we see sometimes, they happen. And anxious, I hold on, hold on, hold on. And then the other feels suffocated. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because then I get abandoned anyway. So these also need to be healed. So when we're talking about transformation, we require knowledge of my own attachment patterns, and I need to work on them. I have to transform them. And the other is cultural ideals. And I'll just share one story, and then I think we will have to stop. So this, I talked about how being in love or sort of having a companionate relationship with somebody can actually lead to falling in love over time. And I had this very interesting experience long ago. This was like, I don't know, I was in my 20s, so long time ago. And there was this girl I met, and we just clicked, and we would hang around for hours together and talking, like sometimes like 24 hours, we would just talk. That's nice, right? And I felt like she was like my sister, very close to me, like a sister soul, very, very close. And I didn't feel any kind of romantic or physical attraction. It was just so pleasant to hang out. And after like 2 years or something, I realized I was very much in love with her. And you know why it took me so long to realize that? Very, very interesting. Cultural ideals. I grew up in India. And at least where I grew up, there was this ideal of beauty. And it has to do with the color of the skin. So fair-skinned people are supposed to be more beautiful. Those who have darker skin are not that beautiful. Now, obviously, not everybody will believe in that or say they believe in it. But that was an idea. It was quite clear to me that was an ideal. And, so I have sort of mixed ancestry, European and African and Middle Eastern and South Asian mixed ancestry going back. So when the genes come together, you don't know how they're going to come out. So my brother, for example, is very, very fair. He can pass off for a South European, especially when he was younger, right? He could just pass off for Spanish or Italian. And I was darker skinned. In my own family, I never experienced that. Like with my mother and father, I never experienced that. But I remember once a relative came home and she looks at me and she says, "Oh, you're so beautiful, but tell me, why are you so dark? Your father is fair, your mother is fair, your brother is fair. Why?" What was I supposed to answer? I'm like this much. And I remember that. And obviously, I remember that because it made an impression on me. That, okay, having darker skin is not good. Having fairer skin is better. It is more attractive. So, long story short, I've grown up. I'm a teenager now, late teens, around 18. I think I was 17, 18 at that time, sitting and watching a movie with my brother. And there was this actress on the screen. And my brother never had that experience, right? Because he was very, very fair. So he never had that experience of, oh, something is wrong with me because I have darker skin. And then there was this actress, and my brother says, "Oh, she's so beautiful." And I couldn't find her beautiful at all. And then I said, "What's?" And then I realized, because she was dark skinned. I couldn't see beauty because she was dark skinned. And I was 17 at that time. So I thought, oh boy, something is wrong here. Because if I looked at her, really, she's very, very beautiful. But just because she was dark, I couldn't see it. My brother could see it because he never had that internalized image of, something dark is not good. So for him, it was, it doesn't matter. But for me, it was like that. And this girl that I fell in love with, she was very dark. And so I felt like, no, I can't be. She's a sister, not a romantic partner. Sister. Right? Because I can't be romantically, because so stupid. And it was totally unconscious, but it was very, very present. And then after like 2 years, I realized, oh my God, I'm actually in love. And that experience, again, that feeling, it is so powerful. That was transformative. After that experience, I even find dark-skinned people beautiful now. It is so, and I'm relieved, first of all, because that is kind of a racist thing, right? But that's it, our childhood experiences are so powerful. By the way, that relationship never developed into anything because I was already a monk at that time. So I didn't want to get into any relationship, but it was still a very, very nice companionship. But that's the cultural ideals. We have also research in psychology, for example. We know that the ideal of beauty is different in different parts of the world because of the cultural ideals. In some places, very thin women or very slim men are supposed to be very, very beautiful. In other places, those who are more well-rounded are supposed to be more beautiful. And even in history, over time, if you look at the Greek statues and paintings, they are typically heavier, the women. And now you see, so these can change. Cultural ideals can change. And these cultural ideals also dictate, in some ways, our experience of who we fall in love with. So this is also an important thing. And this also needs to be transformed, that work of healing and transformation.
Do you have any, so you talked a lot about meditation, but can you give any tools for maybe trying to reach the point where you can separate the I from it?
Yeah. Uh, in my experience, so there are two things. One is meditation, the experience of silence, and the other is knowledge. And I would say we need both. If I, and this is like, to me, it is very, very obvious. If I am not strong inside, deep inside, I will always bring something into the relationship where I'm expecting something from you, and I'm expecting you to fix it for me. So every time I have that experience of frustration and anger, it is because I am expecting you to make me feel good. And you're not doing it, and therefore I am angry at you. There is a lack inside me that is making me behave like that. So this understanding has been very, very important for me. But that is not enough. I need power. I need inner power to be able to overcome that need, that neediness, that you have to make me feel good. You give me a call, you send me a message, you have to make me feel good. That neediness is there in me because there is a lack inside me. So first, understanding that this neediness and the associated anger and frustration is coming from that lack inside me, that spiritual emptiness inside me. That understanding becomes very important because once I understand that, then I say, okay, I'm feeling the anger, I'm feeling the frustration, but you're not responsible for that. I am responsible for it in some way. I'm the one who has to work on it. And yeah, I can ask you to help me out, listen to me, but I have to do the work. So that knowledge is extremely important. And my negative feelings are almost always, except for some extreme cases where maybe if you have hit me or you've beaten me up or something like that, right? But in most cases, that experience is because of my own inner spiritual emptiness. And whatever you are saying, whatever you are doing or not saying, is basically triggering that spiritual emptiness inside me. So that knowledge becomes extremely important for me. But that's not enough. Because along with the knowledge, I need power. I need the power to transcend that neediness. And that power, I believe, comes from, of course, knowledge gives you a part of that power. The second is the experience of silence. Because in deep silence, I am allowing the self to synthesize, to heal. In my experience, I believe in a higher power. I believe in not a religious belief in God, but I believe in a higher power. I believe there is a source of healing in the universe. I don't believe that God is responsible for creating the world and all that. That's not my belief system. But I believe because of my experiences in meditation, I believe there is a source of healing in the universe. People can call it God, whatever, it doesn't matter, it is irrelevant. But in my experience, when I place myself in that presence, the soul begins to heal. It's like, I have a disease that needs to be operated upon, and I need to be on the operating table, and the surgeon has to operate on me. Imagine if I'm on the operating table and I'm moving around. Will that be a good surgery? Probably not. So then I get an anesthesia so I can be very, very still. Then the surgeon can do her work on me or his work on me. And I see the process of meditation as something like that. I place myself in the presence of that power and I become absolutely still. And when I become absolutely still, that power knows what to do. And it begins to heal. I begin to heal. And when I begin to heal, because we don't know what trauma we are carrying, some things we remember, some things we don't remember. Like, for example, the other day, I was talking to a friend, and then she asked me some questions, and she kept asking me questions. And then she said, oh, but I didn't get a clear answer. She was complaining. Then I got a little irritated. And I said, look, my dear, if you want a clear answer, you have to learn to ask the right question. Boom, right? And then after that, I felt something was not right. It wasn't the words, it's the energy I put into those words. Because I felt at some level that she was accusing me, you know, of not being good enough in some way and, whatever. And then it came out that way. Well, if you, my dear, if you want a clear answer, ask a clear question. Fantastic, isn't it? Silly, because it came from that space. Some wound, some injury. Now, I don't know what injury I'm carrying. Sometimes we don't know that. But I'm carrying that injury that makes me vulnerable, that makes me react with anger or with some sort of self-righteousness or indignation, even if it is not full-blown anger, right? I'm carrying that injury. And those injuries, sometimes we know what the injuries are, sometimes we don't know. They're lost to memory. And yet they need healing. So every time I have an experience like that, I say, okay, first of all, then of course I talk to her and I say, I'm sorry, it didn't come from her. And then she didn't even notice that. She said, oh, no, it was fine. But I know because the energy inside me was not right. So I say, okay, something is happening here. And the moment, every time I experience something like that, I go deep into silence. I go deep into silence. And I place myself in the presence of the Supreme. And the experience goes away. And that is why my faith in the Supreme has become stronger, because every time I do that, I feel better. The experience just goes away. If I'm feeling anger at you, I go deep into that stillness. I place myself in the presence of God. I come out of that. It could be 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes sometimes. I feel love for you. And every single time I experience it. And because of that, my faith in that process has become very deep. So the knowledge is important, but we also need power. And that power comes from healing. That healing is needed. That healing releases energy, and that I can re-engage with my world afresh. So these are the two things. Do they make any sense? Yeah. It takes time though, right? It takes time, it takes practice. But we can start the process. Okay. Anything? Yes?
Yeah. Ida asks, for me, romantic love and falling in love is linked with pain and suffering. I think I'm not the only one who feels this way. At the same time, I see many people chase love through dating and longing. What's your reflections on that?
Well, first of all, absolutely. I think I would agree with you, Ida, that it does relate to pain and suffering. And my understanding of that pain and suffering is, I think the first trauma is us getting separated from our own inner spiritual essence, the soul. I think that's the first trauma. Separating from our own beautiful inner nature. And then when we get separated, we want to find that inner nature through something else in the world outside. That could be romantic relationships. That could be eating a lot of cake. It could be anything. But it could be this, you're trying to fill up. Freud talked about oral fixation, right? You want to consume the world to fill up the emptiness inside. And I think, so I would agree with you, Ida. I think it does have to do with pain and suffering, that experience of falling in love, because we're trying to overcome that pain and suffering through some sort of a compensation mechanism where the other becomes the replacement of whatever it is we are missing inside. So you're right. And the other thing as to how people are searching and searching and searching for their partners, I think, well, I don't want to say much about it, I think, but I think it is this longing to be reunited with our own inner essence. I think that is what it is. That is my theory, anyway. We are longing to be reunited with our inner essence. And there is nothing wrong in finding a life partner, of course. So why not? It is beautiful to have a life witness. It's beautiful to do things together with someone. It's beautiful to sit down and have dinner together with someone. All those are very, very beautiful experiences. Nothing wrong in that. But I think what we as human beings need to ask ourselves is, what is the space from which I'm approaching this search? Am I approaching this search from a space of emptiness and trying to fix my inner pain and suffering? Then probably the likelihood is I will end up with frustration and disappointment. Or am I engaging in the search from a space of completeness? Then yes, I may find somebody, I may not find somebody, but I'm working from that space of fullness and completeness. So I think that is the challenge for humanity right now, to reconnect with our inner being, with our inner essence, and to find that completeness within, so that we can bring that completeness with us into our relationships. And those would be beautiful relationships, because then both the I and the you are operating from that space, right? And it's beautiful. It can be beautiful. And even if one side is not operating from that space, even if the other side is operating, that can also help. That can help. And that may also be good enough. But at least one of the two has to be doing that work. Ideally, both should be doing that work. But even if one is doing, that's okay. It's not too bad. I would like you to experiment with something. Have all of you experienced falling in love? Has anyone here not experienced falling in love? Okay, that's a universal thing then, I guess. So think of the first time you fell in love and think of that feeling, that feeling. And in meditation now, try and immerse that feeling while separating it from the object. Try and experiment with that. See what happens. So initially you can bring the face of that person into your mind, immerse the feeling, and then imagine the face just disappearing, and just sit with that feeling. Let's experiment. So let us relax. Once again, pay attention to any tension sitting in the body and let it go. Pay attention to the shoulders and the neck and the tiny muscles of the face. Relax them. And allow the mind to relax. Pay attention to any thoughts, sensations, emotions lingering in the mind, and just let them be. Visualize these as particles of sand in the waters of your mind, gently settling down, making the waters of the mind clear, calm, still. And listen to the silence within. The silence beneath all thought, feeling, emotion. The silence of soul. And in this silence, you place yourself once again in the presence of the highest. And on the screen of your forehead, you bring into your mind the first person that you ever fell in love with, deeply in love. Bring into your mind the feeling associated with that experience of falling in love. The tenderness, the beauty, the affection, the care. Stay with that feeling. If the memory is associated with any pain or sadness, try and separate the love from the sadness and stay with the love. And now imagine that the face in front of you has faded away. And all that remains is the experience of love. Love that you can draw upon whenever you want. Love that resides deep within you. Love that you can share with your world. And holding on to this love and this experience of sweetness and beauty. And tenderness. You allow yourself to gently return back to your present, allowing your eyes to gently blink open and look at the world with love. Simple experience. Go out, the first stranger that you meet afterwards, try and make eye contact and just smile with love if you can. If you can't find anybody, then do it tomorrow.